in a business interest to get bigger and bigger, by your opponent, consolidate, and essentially at some point you just have to say enough is enough.
Welcome. My name is Austin Yenne, and I am a member of the Palm Beach Young Democrats and the manager of the group's blog. That was Austin Frerick at the start. He's a fellow at Open Markets Institute, and he was kind enough to take time out of his busy day for this interview. Austin was talking about market consolidation. Often when we think of farming, we automatically think of the old McDonald farm. As you'll hear in this interview, market consolidation, especially in the agriculture market, has all but killed off small farmers in rural areas. I hope you enjoy. Thank you.
Hey, this is Austin.
Hey Austin, this is Austin.
I was waiting for you to say that.
Alright, so we'll go ahead and start this. So you consider RuPaul and Thurman Arnold among your list of heroes. Those are like the two complete opposite kind of people. Why is that?
Yeah, oh God, that's funny. So the minute you said RuPaul, I just smiled. That's funny. Well, RuPaul's fascinating to me. I mean, I am a young gay Iowan, and, he's such an icon in the gay community. My staff always laughed at me. The way I would relax at night is I would watch RuPaul's Drag Race. You know what I mean? Everyone needs that kind of turn your brain off, feel good TV, and it's just such a good show. And so I go to Arnold. So I actually, confession, I think I actually swapped him out the other day for Louis Brandeis. But what I'm essentially trying to get at there is like a antitrust hero, or more of, I really do think corporate power is the issue of our time. From like a really heady academic space, I think there's an imbalance between capital and labor. And I think Brandeis, Thurgood Arnold, really got at that, and essentially tackling that power, making sure that the average person, small business, all that could have a say. And so, actually, both of these, I guess I should say, are actually underdog heroes in their own unique ways. I mean, RuPaul is a fascinating person where he comes out of the New York 80s club scene, go-go dancer, androgynous, realizes he wants to be famous, acts like a suburban white female, and then becomes superstar of the world. And my partner and I were laughing where 2 years ago we had visited Richmond, and it's a fascinating city where it's having this conversation with itself over its role in the Civil War. I mean, it's a progressive, diverse city, but still has this really haunted past. And we went to one Civil War museum, and then we went to the Confederate War Museum. And the Confederate one, the funniest part of that museum was they had this section on the Confederacy and Confederate flag and pop culture. And there's this great image of RuPaul from the movie Tu Wong Fu, which was like this 90s drag queen movie, where he is a drag queen in it, and he was wearing a Confederate dress. Just think of that imagery. Do you have a queer black male presenting himself as a white female in the Confederate Museum? You know what I mean? He's screwing with your mind, and I don't think they even got it.
That's hilarious.
So subversive and brilliant. But he's doing it with a smile.
Yeah, that's hilarious. Thank you for that. That was great.
Political lesson to learn. You change our minds by, he's been through a lot, but he does it with a smile. People, I think it's such a great political lesson.
Yeah, I mean, you gave me that great story, so I'm going to forgive you for changing Thurman Arnold for Justice Brandeis and syncing my interview now.
Oh. No, that's fine. I mean, Thurman Arnold, it was this really weird, nerdy debate I was having with a friend. So, for context, I believe he was FDR's antitrust head in DOJ and kind of did a lot of the trust busting under that era. For Louis Brandeis, I had never really heard of Louis Brandeis until recently. He's one of those people, the more you'll learn, the more you're amazed by.
Yeah. So, what got you interested in economics?
So this is funny, Austin. I didn't realize this actually until a few months ago. I actually did my undergrad thesis on slaughterhouse towns in Iowa, and essentially they were modern-day company towns. And I wrote about how there's a term in econ called monopsony. I never say it right. But
monopsony?
Yeah, where essentially there's only one buyer of labor in a town. And I wrote about how these small towns, meatpacking used to be a good job. I mean, you had the jungle, concentrated meat, exploiting labor. We busted the meat trust. You had this prosperity where, it's always going to be hard work, but at least it paid a solid middle-class job. And then what you essentially see over the last 2 decades, it reconcentrated to a point now where it's more concentrated than when the jungle was written, and 2 of the 4 largest meat companies are foreign-owned. And it was just researching this in these small towns, and this is just when I got in tune to this world a little bit, but I've always personally been attracted to the David versus Goliath story, but I think that's just more to also a reflection of who I am. I'm a first-generation college kid, so I've always had that underdog mentality.
All right. So, you worked in the Obama administration's Treasury Department, specifically the Office of Tax Analysis. How did you land that job?
Oh, so just to clarify, I wasn't a political appointee. It was civil service. I could have worked for Trump right now too, but I decided to pass. Well, I actually did for a little bit, I should say. So my first job out of grad school was at this little tiny thing called Congressional Research Service, which essentially it's part of the Library of Congress, and its job is essentially be information essentially help Congress make better policy. I was there and then recommended to this job at Treasury, and so I never would have thought I would be doing tax policy. I went to grad school to study poverty policy, but it was kind of at grad school where I realized to truly do poverty policy, you have to understand the tax code, because we hide so much of it in the tax code. Like a good chunk of Obamacare is tax credits. So it was kind of, taking a tax law class, being really fascinated by it, kind of led me into tax world. And I remember just in my interview, I wrote in a paper in my tax law class on, that Goldilocks thing, like too hot, too cold, just right?
Mm-hmm.
I wrote a 50-page paper on 3 tax policies, one that was too bad, too good, or where Obama gave too much money, too little money, and just right amount of money. Which is you don't see to me, I think I was 24, 25 at the time, write 50-page tax papers that they're really excited about.
Who doesn't get excited by 50-page tax policy pages?
I know. Well, it was either write a paper or take a tax law class. I'm I don't know too much about law, but the thought of doing a law test or those huge, I was nope, I'd much rather write. Give me a few weeks, let me just think about a paper. I'm much because when you hand in a paper, you know if it's good or bad. Whereas I don't want to take one test where it determines my grade because it's too much of a gamble.
Also in November of 2016, you co-wrote a tax analysis paper with Laura Power on excess returns, or in other words, monopoly profits. What caught your interest to motivate you both to write that paper?
So that's just something we kind of fell into. That's more, God, I hope you didn't read that paper so jargony.
Yeah.
It's the classic example of critiques I have of the academy of you write stuff that's so, there's words in that. We use the phrase super rents, which is just to me a fancy way of saying monopoly profits. But, in order to get it published, we had to use certain words that a certain professor wanted. We were just actually updating our model. Treasury has, we make our office, our job essentially make estimates of how much would this tax policy cost us and all that. So, there's a debate or what is the ratio between, so we were updating ratios for that. And, I went down rabbit holes of how does this over time change for different industries? And we were kind of shocked by the patterns we were seeing, but just kind of led to the paper. And then also kind of led me to find Open Markets, Matt Stoller, David Dane, because I was it's one thing to see, monopoly level profits in, say, pharmaceuticals. Part of the deal you make with pharma is you research a lot, spend a lot of money on research. Okay, create this special new thing. Okay, you get a 10-year patent or whatever it is, and you essentially get monopoly level profits off it until the patent expires. But I was seeing it in this paper, you're seeing it concentrated industries in food. And you would think, well, anyone can make a cracker. The barriers to entry aren't there, so what's going on here? And it was kind of it just didn't make sense, which kind of led me into oh, this is a bigger economy-wide thing.
You mentioned that you ended up leaving the Treasury to go run for Congress back in Iowa's 3rd District. What motivated you to go run for office, specifically that district? Did you grow up there? Is that your hometown district?
So, what motivated me to run was, a lot of my family actually voted for Trump. It was, I don't think people are working more and more for less and less. And what I saw is just a lot of frustration. And so I was coming along to this message, want to be near home. And to me, I thought this message, this monopoly message, corporate power message, validated the anger that fueled Trump, but redirected it in a non-nationalistic, non-xenophobic way. So, Trump's going to blame the immigrant, the brown, the Latino immigrant. I'm going to blame Tyson. So that's kind of what led to this whole campaign of this to me really explains a lot of what's going on here. And the joke I always told people when I was campaigning, I had a Monopoly board game that I would wave up saying we got to use this word more. Because it's hard, because when you first hear Monopoly, people kind of they think the board game, they don't think the economy. And there's also an illusion of choice where you can go to the airport, you see Hertz, Avis, all these things. But it's really just 2 companies. They all kind of own, there's that illusion of choice. They have all those brand names. So you don't realize how truly concentrated it is.
As a young gay millennial running for Congress in what's considered a conservative district, did you face difficulties with getting people to take you serious?
Oh, no, not at all. I'm very fortunate. There's so many people before me who, laid the groundwork, where actually one of the first people who run openly gay for Congress in America was in Iowa. And Rich Eichner, one of my supporters in parts of this district, back in, I think, I want to say Rich ran in the late 70s, but it could have been the early 80s. Iowa was also the third state to legalize gay marriage. And so, we're coming on the 10-year anniversary. And if anything, I think a lot of people were shocked to find out that the current congressman doesn't support same-sex marriage. Dave Young, the sitting congressman, lives in Logan Circle, D.C., in a $1.8 million home, which, for context of D.C., that's kind of the neighborhood. So it's really sad to see that he lives among a community that he doesn't even support. And I think it just goes to show the hollowness of him.
Okay. So you ran your campaign heavily focused on monopolies and breaking them up, specifically agriculture monopolies. You consistently called them Big AG. What exactly is Big AG?
Oh, Big Ag.
What exactly is that? Can you explain to me what big agriculture is?
Oh, yeah. Well, to be fair, part of it was Twitter, limited space. You got to be careful when you say Big Ag, because sometimes farmers think you're talking about them, and you want to make sure you distinguish between farmers and these agribusiness monopolies. I mean, farmers are really being squeezed right now, both on the input and output side. What you're seeing now is all these huge there's been tons of mergers, acquisitions among the inputs, Bayer buying Monsanto, DuPont, and they're essentially going the Comcast model, where everything you need to farm will essentially come from two or three companies. So, your seed, your chemical, your farming data is an important thing now. The two companies, they're all buying each other in a sense. So farmers right now are seeing declining commodity prices, so they're trying to reduce input costs. But do you think, does Comcast lower its prices? Do you think Monsanto will lower its prices? You essentially seen corn seed triple in price in the last 10 years, and I promise you that seed did not get 3 times as good. So now you have the concentration on the input side. And then on the output side, there's only a handful of slaughterhouses you could, sell to. There's only a handful, companies that sell food in the grocery store. So they're really feeling the squeeze right now. And to me, it's also, Democrats are an urban party. And so to me, politically, if you're trying to re-engage rural voters, the easiest and quickest way is just talk pocketbook issues. And the fact that, I'm a young gay man who can talk corn seed prices, and I'm validating the pain they feel in their pocketbook, we got a lot of inroads into these communities because of that.
So could you explain a little bit more about the farming areas? So you're talking about seed prices here. So wouldn't you just buy a bag of seeds, and as you grow your product, that product would produce more seeds, or?
That's a good question. Vast majority of farmers of Iowa, Iowa's mostly corn and soybean, is genetically engineered. And essentially, you can't replant that seed. I believe it's illegal. It won't be as good. So you have to buy the new seed every year from your seed company. Also, the way they kind of work together is, usually if you buy the seed, you have to buy the certain, pesticide or herbicide, because they work in conjunction together. They've been engineered to, you spray a chemical, they'll kill everything but the seed. So that's kind of why, that actually is a concern among farmers I've talked to, is it used to be able, you could grow your own, but then there's been lawsuits where, some genetically engineered seed comes into your field, you get that seed, is that patent infringement? Or even because you have to clean your seeds, a lot of those seed cleaners are dying off.
So we're talking about genetically engineered seeds here. So wouldn't you just go back to regular farming, natural farming?
I mean, that's what the funny thing about organic farming is, really just the way we used to farm. You could, and you're seeing people do it, but, some people, no, I also have to tell you, I'm also from urban Iowa. I'm not a farmer. This is just something from what I'm hearing from people, but people would say, you don't get as many bushels out of an acre. But yeah, those are you could do that. But right now, our current agricultural system is, with the crop insurance and all that, is predicated on volume.
During your campaign, you called up for the breaking of Monsanto. In your view, what would that like if it were to be done? How would you break up Monsanto?
So yeah, Bayer Monsanto just went through a merger, and I was pushing that merger heavily. Not only opposing the merger, but calling for the breakup of Monsanto. And I think you could separate the different components. The simple one thing too is the person who sells you your chemicals should not also sell you your seed. Those should be different entities. Kind of a comparison I would make is, it's kind of like, think of maybe Facebook. The way people talk about breaking up Facebook is just an advertising company that uses as much data on you as possible to sell you the most targeted ads as possible. So just separate Facebook, Instagram make its own company, Messenger its own company, just kind of separate the components. That's something you can maybe look at Monsanto here. I don't want to prescribe per se. I think my bigger point is just on market power. Like, this company has too much power. It's hard to say a market's competitive when 2 companies sell 78% of all corn seed in this country. And part of it is just starting a conversation over, yes, that is too powerful. Because a monopoly doesn't form overnight. It's an acquisition every year after acquisition after acquisition. At some point, you got to say enough is enough. Like, for example, in the meat industry, the number one company that is slaughtered a quarter of all meat in America is JBS, Brazilian company. They weren't even operating in the U.S. 2 decades ago. All they did is they came in, and they bought one company, they bought another one, and they bought another one.
You know, as you were talking about breaking up Monsanto and obviously against the Bayer-Monsanto merger, the Koch brothers funded think tank went out and attacked you. What was that about?
Oh, I mean, that's how this game works. They just want to put out disinformation. They want to muddle the waters. So it makes it harder. I have to remember that was last fall. They were essentially saying bigger is better because, they can innovate more. A historical example I like to use is actually look at Standard Oil. You know, that was a century ago when we broke up Standard Oil. Rockefeller actually made more money after it was broken up because essentially all these old companies were then able to innovate more. So I think the whole logic is wrong, kind of counterintuitive. But yeah, I mean, this whole apparatus, and the Koch bros is just robber barons. That's all they are. And so they just fund all these little fake organizations that are out there to push propaganda that reinforces their bottom line. To me, it was like a badge of honor, like we're doing something right here if we're poking the beast, and the beast takes the swat at you.
So you just mentioned robber barons, and one of the other things that you also talk about is this second Gilded Age. Can you explain to me what a robber baron is and what a Gilded Age is?
Yeah. So Gilded Age is a funny term to use. It's, the classic definition is like turn of the century. It comes from Mark Twain. Just people kind of conceptualize Gilded Age as 2 different eras. That's what historians would say. When I'm talking with like a high school class, they haven't heard of that era. So I'll essentially say, oh, the new Great Gatsby movie with Leonardo DiCaprio. That's a movie they've all seen. All I'm trying to get at here is essentially a moment of overindulgence in the country by a few at the expense of many. For the Koch brothers, the reason why I call them robber barons is these are just these 2 men are essentially pushing policies on millions of us to benefit their bottom line because they have that much power. There was a story in the New York Times a few weeks ago where they were essentially funding all this anti-mass transit things across the country where most Americans want mass transit. Most Americans do not want to sit in a car and drive an hour and a half if you live in a city. But they were funding all this because they have a huge oil portfolio. And, having mass transit system eats into their bottom line. And to me, it's just, that's kind of what I mean when I say robber baron getting at, is people using their economic power to corrupt the political system for their economic advantage.
With the Bayer-Monsanto merger, so obviously the Trump administration allowed this to go through. What's that mean for farmers? How's that going to directly affect their bottom line?
Oh, it's going to be, I think we're on the verge of another farm crisis. And you're seeing it now where farmland's in a bubble. Who knows with the potential trade war, what's going to happen to farmers. It's going to impact their bottom line because with monopoly pricing, it makes the companies more powerful. As we've seen before, prior examples, with monopoly power comes from monopoly pricing. And as their incomes collapse, their livelihoods collapse, these monopolies are going to suck up more of their money. And as we saw with the last farm crisis in the 80s, you just saw more consolidation. If the young farmer, loses his farm and then the other one, bigger boys get bigger. So, that's kind of what I see happening here. And then monopolies will stifle innovation. So someone might come along with a new thing, but then Monsanto doesn't want it competing with you, so it'll undermine it. Or it's also pushing us to use maybe more chemicals than we need to be using. I was having this huge debate right now of water quality. We have some of the worst water in the country. You notice it when you're driving where you literally see people farming right up to the creek, and Monsanto wants that because, hey, you're buying more product. But number one, all of us have to deal with that water here in Iowa, that really bad, nitrates leaking into the water. You see it down in the Gulf with Louisiana with all the runoff. But then the farmer, what's missing here too is the farmer has to do that because right now they're barely getting by and they have to push their land. They have to do that short term, helping themselves in the short term at the expense of the long term. The margins are so thin. So it's one of those things where we're all losing to the advantage of the monopoly.
Well, you were on the campaign trail. You went and did an investigation into the Iowa Farm Bureau. And I want to talk about the Iowa Farm Bureau for a little bit here. What exactly is the Iowa Farm Bureau, and how is that different than the American Farm Bureau Foundation or the National Farmers Union?
Yeah, so the Iowa Farm Bureau is a unique one, mainly for its size. The Iowa Farm Bureau has an operating budget about like $89, $90 million a year. That is more than twice the operating budget of the national one, and no other state comes close. Even for comparison, the largest progressive organization, National Farmers Union, has a $2 or $3 million budget. So just by its pure size, the Iowa one, I'm equating money with power. So just based on that, they dominate the conversation. And what makes the Iowa one unique is essentially has a multi-billion-dollar for-profit insurance arm. And so, you're having all these mergers going along. Clearly, farmers, you go into small towns, you're talking to them, they're feeling the pain. They're not understanding why these mergers are going on. You look at the numbers, and just common sense tells you this isn't good. Yet the Iowa Farm Bureau was silent. And so, I dug into their financials, and the way insurance companies work, from what I've been told, is what they get, what you pay them, and what they pay out in claims is essentially a wash. They make their money from when they hold on to your money. So you might pay premiums every year, but then 5 years later, eventually you have a claim. It's what they make off that investment income. So what I noticed going through because they're a public company, the Iowa Farm Bureau owns like 70-80% of them, but not all of it, is you see millions of dollars of all these investments in Monsanto, ExxonMobil, like all this stuff. And you're like, oh, I get what's going on here. You're putting your investment portfolio ahead of farmers by, not opposing these seed mergers, but also not doing anything on climate change. I mean, that's clearly the science on that. It's crystal clear at this point what it's going to be. It's going to impact Iowa farmers. And the fact that as of 2015, their platform didn't even believe in climate change, and then this past year, it didn't even mention climate change. Says a lot about where their true interests lie.
So you just talked about how you looked into their finances. What motivated you to go look into the Iowa Farm Bureau's finances?
Just curiosity. I mean, it was just why are they not doing this? What's going on here? I guess I should also say what kind of prompted me too was a 2000 investigation by 60 Minutes into the Iowa Farm Bureau of just kind of some shenanigans that were going on. So it's I wonder if this behavior has changed, and maybe that's explaining what's going on here. There's that great quote attributed to Mark Twain where the past doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes.
We were talking earlier about a farming crisis. It sounds like you don't think there is one right at this moment, but you think one's coming, while others say that there is a farming crisis.
I should also say, just when I say farming crisis, what I really do mean is a rural community crisis. Because also, farmers are getting bigger and bigger, but it's also too, a lot of these rural communities are centered around the economies of farm, making tractors, selling seeds, all that stuff. So, there's a ripple effect there. But I know there's a lot of talk of trade war. You're not quite seeing it in the commodity pricing data. What you're really seeing is just a lot of farmers are over-leveraged. They have really high debt ratios. They're essentially kind of mirroring the 80s. And right now, cheap interest rates are keeping them afloat. But as we've seen before, as interest rates rise by the Fed, it gets more expensive to have a lot of debt. I think that's where you're going to see a lot of those. There's a phrase my buddy from Arkansas likes to use called come to Jesus moment. So the signs are there. It's just, and you talk to people, and things aren't pretty. I mean, because what happened too is the market's also really glutted now. We had really good few years. A lot of farmers took a lot of land out of conservation, try to cash it and make more money. Well, now that demand's not there, and so they're feeling that pain.
Iowa's the nation's largest pork producer, and the communities near these slaughterhouses, as you're talking about, are very poor, and they're struggling to afford housing, among other things. Is that because of a monopoly, or is that because of wages?
I would say there's this notion of the Ronald McDonald Farm, and that's just not true anymore. I mean, the saddest thing about, I just noticed in the campaign was, growing up in Iowa, 7th generation, when you're surrounded by all it, you leave for a few years to go work in D.C., you come home, and you realize, wow, wait, something's really changed here. There's no livestock on farms anymore. They're all raised in they're called CAFOs, those confined, these big sheds, essentially, jam full of animals. So essentially that one person who owns it is making a lot more money, but instead of having 20 little small independent pig farmers, you have one big one. So, I mean, that's the sad paradox of this moment is, you have Iowa, some of the world's best farmland, yet more and more we can't even feed our own children. And part of that is when you have 10 pig farmers who become one big pig farmer, you're also concentrating the pollution. So, 20 years ago, pig farm would take manure, spread it on his field, using, for fertilizer. What you're seeing now is you concentrate that many pigs in one area, you essentially call them lakes. Essentially you have a lake full of all because too much manure for one person to deal with, and you put it all in this lake. And so, if that lake breaks, it goes into a creek, or just, you're just concentrating that bad environmental output. Oh, and they're horrible to drive by.
Well, I can imagine the smell can't be great.
No, and I can barely smell. But that's one of the few things I can smell.
You were actually talking about climate change. We've been talking about this. So, what are some ways that farmers out there are combating climate change?
That's a good question. So, just for Iowa, in Iowa's context, what climate change will mean is hotter summers and more intense rainstorms. So, what that means, so instead of having 2-inch rainstorms, you have more 6-inch flash flooding, which will essentially make nitrogen chemicals on the farm field run off into the creeks faster, happen more often. So I talked about the problems of Farm Bureau and all that, being part of the problem, not the solution. But there's hope here. I mean, there are people doing some incredible things, and one of my favorite organizations was the Practical Farmers of Iowa. There tends to be a lot of younger group of farmers, and they're moving to farming more in the way one of them put it to me the other day is like, you're farming living systems. Like the soil is a living thing. You're having more, there's resilience and diversity. So, growing cover crop, you harvest corn in October, you don't plant again until May. We'll put some, cover crop on it, some white radishes, essentially hold that soil in place over the winter. So, to stop that, those rain events from, just washing your soil away into the creek, or, adapting different products, different commodities. So, you are seeing farmers make changes, but we need to make more, cover crops in Iowa are only about 2% of our land mass. Why is it not 98? Why is it not all but 2? Farm Bureau's in the way of it. They're not, their propaganda might say they care, but their action, what they do behind closed doors says otherwise. And so I think there's no, we know what the solutions are, and now it's all about scale. And do we have the political will to implement them?
So, speaking of political will, obviously you're no longer running for Congress. Do you see other people in your state running on and talking about monopolies?
Not in Iowa. I've seen some other people. You've seen Senator Warren talk about it, Senator Klobuchar up in Minnesota, Congressman Rokana, Congressman Ellison. People are talking about it, and there's that House Antitrust Caucus. I'm really optimistic. I think more and more, I've had a lot of conversations with candidates looking to talk about it. But the challenge of talking about it is, you can't just say monopoly. You have to name names for people. You have to make it tangible for their life. And there's no bigger target you put on your back than when you say Monsanto's too big. This is my race alone. So not only did I have that Koch-funded group kind of come after us, right after they maxed out to the Republican incumbent, Dave Young, which I kind of expected because he's nothing more than a corporate lackey. But the thing that kind of shocked me the most was Monsanto's one of their largest lobbyists, this man named Terry Crawford, who's taken more than $2 million from them since 2010, essentially became a co-chair for one of my Democrat primary opponents. They play both sides, and it's just hard. It's harder. He can write her, $5,000 check. If I have a bunch of teachers, subway artists, all that giving me $10, $20, that takes a lot more power, a lot more to come over that. And so that's the concern with, and he's a power broker. He's known, people have him on talk shows. He'll be like the Iowa Democrat, insider. He was co-chair of Secretary Clinton's campaign in Iowa. But the guy's just a lobbyist. He makes his money from selling access. And so, it prevents these conversations from occurring.
You've mentioned that you're now working at a think tank? Mm-hmm. Which think tank?
I'm at Open Markets.
Okay. So you're working at Open Markets now. And you also announced this past week that you're going to start writing for Forbes?
Yeah, isn't that funny? I told my partner, I was just in a small-town Iowa diner with my grandparents. I also got this random email. I was like, Forbes, what? They read some of my Farm Bureau work, and they're looking for me to write about agriculture and antitrust. So, yeah, that will be coming probably in August. There's a few little projects I'm wrapping up now. But, yeah, I'm at Open Markets. I'm a fellow there, and you might have heard, what happened. They were essentially part of New America about a year ago, but then it's almost comical how messed up it was. But, the EU came out with a fine on Google saying, antitrust monopoly violation. Here's $2 billion or whatever. They came out, this little, Open Markets came out and said, oh, great job, EU. Well, New America told them to delete that press release. And then a few months later, kicked them out of the organization. Turns out the CEO of New America is Eric Schmidt, the former CEO of, that was just comical, and it's corruption. Just kind of the corrosion you see all around us. We left New America, created our own little thing. So our goal is essentially get you using the word monopoly more, because we really do think it's the issue of our time.
What could people expect to come out from your work in Forbes?
Actually, I think my first article is going to be on farming data. I was, a friend of mine farms down in Madison County, and he was telling me, that's a huge issue of, there's that delay effect in technology with farmers, farmers tend to be older white men, but farming data is really important. These tractors collect a lot of information. Each little square foot of the farm, it's like, how profitable was it? How much, it could tell you how much fertilizer to put on it, all that kind of stuff. So the question is, A, who owns all this farming technology? And then who owns the data? Is it the machine or is it the farmer? And then is it the renter or is it the landowner? So just kind of figuring out this space, that's going to be my big first stories I write about. I have some we're working on a bigger thing. Just keep an eye out. We have a bigger data project we're working on. Hopefully, knock on wood, you'll see it in the New York Times soon.
Now, I want to follow up on what you just mentioned there. You just mentioned tractor and data. Now, I saw you posted a video a while back about hacking into a tractor.
Oh, probably. The scary tractors, I feel like that's what farming and data and all this whole space, I think it's one of the least, everyone's obsessed with driverless cars. Driverless tractors are probably going to happen sooner because they're not going to kill anyone. They're just going to go into a ditch. But, like, you know, someone could hack it. I mean, there's a lot of questions over it. I mean, part of it is like the disconnect between coastal media establishment and technology and, you know, quote, flyover country, middle America. But yeah, I mean, that's a concern. I actually don't know where this article is going to go, which is always kind of fun just to kind of like dive into something new and figure out what's going on.